Hey, it's Deborah. Do exercise and fasting even belong in the same sentence? I've got the inside scoop for you in this episode. Is exercise fasted a faster way to weight loss, or is it sabotaging you? Is there a better way to fast? I'm going to answer those questions. And before I dive in, this podcast is brought to you by CBD For Life. It's become a staple in my routine lately. I am definitely one of us who love to exercise. Whether that's true for you or not, we all get a little creaky now and then. Did you know we lose fat in our feet? And I've been feeling it lately. After long hikes here in Scottsdale or steep ones, my feet ache. Instead of waiting to see how it's going to be in the morning, I've been using the lavender or the lemongrass rub from CBD For Life on my feet. In fact, I just realized I did it last night and then I haven't even thought about my feet since. Now it's after a 7-miler on the trails. It is great for reducing inflammation, CBD that is. And you can do it in a rub, in a lotion. You can do it in a tincture under your tongue, but I kind of like to go right to the source of the pain. In answer to so many of your questions, yes, it's safe as long as you know and trust the source, like I trust CBD For Life. And hey, it comes from Boulder and a female-run company. What's not to love? I'll link to that in the show notes, and you can try it with the Flipping 50 code for a special listener discount. All right, so let's dive into all things fasting. First of all, there is a continuum of fasting, and some amount of fasting is something we should all be doing to optimize health. So let's get that off the plate right away. A 12-hour overnight fast from dinner to breakfast is normal. It's something maybe we don't all do. We may snack after dinner, but we should really be giving our body a break because you have a lot of regeneration that's going on overnight. While you're sleeping, your brain and your body is doing a ton of cleanup and repair, and it really can't do that if you've given it food and it's also trying to digest. But also, in addition to the 12 hours overnight, you should be fasting between meals, counter to the popular and widely spread advice to eat small meals throughout the day to keep your blood sugar stable, and I quote unquote. That is not my advice, by the way. We should be eating 3 meals, no snacks. And if we have a problem with that, we need to definitely address it, and you need to temporarily potentially snack in order to avoid feeling poorly. But you don't want to continue doing that, because what you're doing then is feeding the symptom that's telling you something is wrong, and you're not actually getting to the solution. You're prolonging what's wrong and potentially making it worse. So 12 hours overnight and between meals, ideally that's what we should all be doing. Now, I'm not talking about those of you who are, say, training for some mega endurance event, but also there are a lot fewer of you in our listenership than there are women in menopause who are just trying to exercise to maintain their good health and their energy and vitality and maybe get their body back after hormones have kind of flipped the switch on what the heck is happening with fat burning. So then there's this. With fasting, there's taking it a step further with a shortened window by a later breakfast and an earlier dinner. For many, that's the first foray into what's known now as intermittent fasting. So there are intermittent periods of the day and or night when you're eating and not eating. And many of you, you're listening right now and you would never have thought that you were quote unquote fasting after dinner by not eating before bed and then sleeping all night instead of eating. But truly you are. Even that is giving your body a break. And I want to make it clear too, because I didn't mention this at the very beginning, but what I always talk about is based on research, not just about fasting in this case and exercise in this case, but based on fasting and exercise for you if you're a woman in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause, because that's what we're really curious about, because you are a different animal, woman. So your hormones, while you're on that roller coaster ride that is known as perimenopause, and you may not even know it, you may not have identified it. There are a lot of health experts who even weren't familiar with perimenopause or ever heard it until they were going through it themselves. And yet, that is what will make you so unique and may change your blood sugar levels. Your stress is something that you're much more susceptible to the negative effects of stress. Stress in itself and those negative emotions and feelings that happen with it also affect negatively your blood sugar levels. So if you've got to factor all that in, you're in a perfect storm. And so the way you deal and the benefits or not that you have from fasting and exercise may be very unique from studies that pertain simply to fasting for younger women or younger men. I will have to say this, there is a lot of positive press, positive research on how fasting can help aging and reverse aging. But we just want to make sure before you jump in that you're not in a perfect storm where maybe it's just not an appropriate time for you. So let's take that a step further. We just looked at the intermittent fasting and that first foray of overnight, between meals, you're fasting, and maybe you're making breakfast a little bit later, even an hour, and dinner a little earlier, maybe an hour. And some will shorten the eating window to that 8 hours, and others will shorten it even further to 5 or to 4 hours where they're eating during the day. You can look at other ways of fasting while eating. Sounds good. By giving your body a break, blending foods, by consuming smoothies. And I know you get it. I'm a smoothie girl, but soups too would work. So what you're looking for is food that is light in fat and carbohydrates. But you do want to maintain protein, especially if you're a woman who's prone to losing lean muscle mass and you're trying to fight the fat. The last thing you want to do is go for an extended period of time. And I mean really weeks or months, on end, where the majority of the time you're eating too little protein. That's not good for your overall metabolism. Losing muscle defeats metabolism, and it's really harder to get it back after 50 than it was ever to get it in the first place. So hang on to what you've got with everything you can. So it's supportive of some of the benefits of fasting when you're having, say, 2 smoothie meals a day and then a regular meal, just a reasonable regular meal, or you're having smoothie and soup and lighter foods and less quote-unquote fuel, to borrow a term from my friend Dr. Alan Christensen. And I will try to remember in this podcast to link to interviews that I've done with Dr. Christensen as a part of his metabolism reset diet. He also mentions the benefit of not doing high fat, not doing high carbohydrate, because those are things he refers to as fuel. They require a lot more work by the body. Protein requires some energy for breaking down, but what you're not doing, if you're skipping protein or you're including protein, what you're not doing is at risk for losing muscle. You're going to be able to keep it. And that's been documented for decades with publications like the Obesity Journal, looking at no matter any age group, but there are studies out there on postmenopausal women in a weight loss program who are taking in higher amounts of protein. and their ability to lose the weight but sustain muscle mass was so much better compared to other women. So we're looking at give your body a break by fasting or eating lighter in general, and your liver gets a break, and you can do some regeneration. Your liver needs it regularly, and if it's sluggish, your metabolism is going to be sluggish. And ingredients in your smoothies can also be optimized to support the liver even further. So having cilantro or celery or adding green apples to your smoothie can benefit the liver. Weight loss is proven in women who consume 2 smoothies a day versus 3, because that's hard to stick to. No chewing, no crunching. That can get a little old. And the consumption of high protein helps maintain lean muscle mass during weight loss, intentional weight loss. Other fasting options include doing alternate days of consuming about 25% of the total usual calories that you consume. So alternating days might mean today is a normal day for you. Tomorrow, you're going to really cut back and eat much, much lighter, just 25% of your usual calories. Another option is doing a 5-2 ratio. It's 5 normal days of eating, whatever your pattern might be, and then 2 non-consecutive days of 0, water, to 25% calories. And I guess you could qualify some clear teas and coffee, black coffee. But those 2 days, you're really fasting. There's really nothing. And I know some doctors who work in hormones who actually do that. 2 days a week, it's their fasting days. It's just what they do. They built it into their lifestyle. And let's face it, in some ways, it's a whole lot easier to fast and go out with your friends than it is to maintain a special diet and go out with your friends, right? There are some myths associated with fasting, and they're this. Number 1, you'll be hungry all the time. And number 2, you will be exhausted all the time while you're fasting. And I can tell you from not only some of the studies I've reviewed and what they suggest are true outcomes, but I can also vouch for myself and more so my clients, for whom private clients, we've determined this is an appropriate step to take. And observing them and monitoring them throughout, these are the things that have been across the board on all counts, pieces that we found. So from the studies, that fasting actually may be supportive of bone health, that it improves self-esteem, decreases anxiety and depression, improves alertness, actually. So the fatigue is maybe a myth, improves the quality of sleep. And there you go again, right? Decreasing fatigue for sure if you wake up feeling more rested and slept deeper, and even reduce symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis or RA. So things to consider. It may not be what you thought it was. There are 2 articles that were published in 2014 in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition and 1 published in the Journal of Functional Morphology and Kinesiology in October of 2017, so fairly recent. They both found no difference in weight loss or fat loss, and also no harm by exercising in a fasted or a fed state. In a recent podcast with women's health and hormone expert Dr. Felice Gersh, she recommended exercise fasted, followed by a high-protein breakfast. So we're talking about exercise in the morning specifically for women in menopause and beyond. However, my search for research for supporting studies reveals nothing to date, anyway, to prove that fasting before exercise is better. I'm still looking, and I'll keep you posted. There are significant studies showing a high-protein breakfast, however, serves women better in losing weight, keeping muscle, and making better choices at concurrent meals. Meaning if you have a high protein breakfast, and often you're going to want to add fiber to that. So the studies didn't necessarily, they were looking at an isolated place at protein, but I'm including fiber because it also helps to keep you full and remove toxins and excess estrogen from your body, decreasing cortisol by doing so. But when you're doing that, concurrent meals, high breakfast means that high protein breakfast means you will make better choices at lunch. And if you make good choices at lunch, you will make better choices for supper and potentially between, where that craving, hangry thing can happen. A benefit of fasting is glucagon production. Now, what the heck? Glucagon is one of the dirty dozen, the hormones that are influenced by exercise. Glucagon does for fat burning what insulin does for fat storage. So if you know what I mean, when insulin is present, it's got a job to do, but unfortunately, if it stays present too long, it actually encourages fat storage. So when you eat a high sugary meal, your insulin comes in, spikes, all fat burning stops, and all fat storage starts. Yeah, not the effect we were looking for. So that is a higher production of glucagon that occurs in a fasted state will help you burn more fat. So you're revving up the engine. There is research to show a heavier reliance on fat for fuel exercising in a fasted state. This is true, but what typically happens is a very slow use of that fuel. You get the message? And that means energy expenditure overall is significantly lower. So if you are doing high intensity interval training, you're burning calories really fast. The portion or percentage of them that comes from fat is much lower, but a lot of a low percent is more in this case than a half or a lot or all of a really low number, right? So let me say that again. If you're doing high intensity exercise, the caloric burn is super high and you're only burning a smaller fraction of that as fat, but a small fraction of a really big number is bigger in this case than a number that starts really low, even if it's almost all fat. So if you want to burn more fat, high intensity interval training will actually do that. You just don't want to do it all the time because it will also lead to more injury. So there is research to show heavier reliance on fat for fuel. So yes, that's true, but it happens at such a slow rate. You don't want to get caught in that feeling of, oh, I have to keep my heart rate down because I'm going to want to burn more fat. It just doesn't really work that way. But doing a couple high intensity interval trainings a week and a couple lower, slower walks, especially if you're loving it, can also help you burn more fat. So burning more calories in a short bout of exercise can result in a lower percent of fat used for fuel, but still a higher number of calories from fat. I know I've said that like 3 times, but it's really important if you're still stuck in the quote unquote fat burning zone. And I illustrate that in You Still Got It Girl, the book. And I'll link to that in the show notes. During really hard workouts, intense interval training or sprint training, for instance, your body uses carbohydrates first and foremost because they're easy to digest. So what about fasting and exercise? Eating something before high intensity interval training could be really smart. It's easy to digest. That's what you're looking for. Pre-exercise snacks that still avoid food sensitivities. So that can be really important to you. What kinds of things am I talking about? Maybe like something made from rice as opposed to whole wheat or whole grain. Looking at, I will use brown rice tortillas and I'll either use them with an almond nut butter, or I will bake them and use them as like a dip in hummus. So a little bit of fat, a little bit of carbohydrate, and that can get you started. The carbohydrate starts the burning of fuel, and then the fat and the little bit of protein that you're taking as well can keep you burning for longer into the workout. Before longer endurance exercise, that ultimately, when the endurance or the distance, the time you're going to spend goes up, the intensity level usually goes down. So something like hiking, long, slow walks, or bike rides may be more appropriate for you, more comfortable for you not to eat, depending on who you are and how your gut feels. But remember, the energy expenditure is lower, so you're not going to burn fuel really fast, but you are able to burn fat for hours. And if you're doing activity you love, you're also reducing cortisol while you're doing it, and it could boost fat burn. Because when cortisol is up, your body is actually storing fat just to protect you, just in case. Thanks, right? Metabolic flexibility is a must. So be careful. I want to regroup here and make sure you understand I'm not straying too far from exercise and fasting, but I'm pointing out that we don't want to go down this singular road of fasting before exercise all the time. It may be that fasting before longer, slower, or moderate workouts works for you, but before high intensity, you really need some fuel in order to put out the effort that makes it high intensity in the first place. But you also need some metabolic flexibility. You don't want to get into a trap of what really essentially is dieting all the time, going really low calorie. So don't cut out food groups altogether, especially carbs and fats, because you ultimately will eat them again, or you'll be exposed. And when you do, your body will either store them or burn them. And if you go too long with too few calories, you slow your metabolism, almost ensuring that when you're exposed to those again, you'll be storing them. You absolutely want a higher caloric intake on some days, especially on those days you're active. Your metabolic needs change as your activity level does. You can eat approximately the same, but you want to kind of bookend your workouts with pre-exercise fuel that's appropriate and post-exercise fuel that's appropriate if it's been a high-intensity workout. Don't overcompensate if it's not. It's also important to consider if you're more athletic in general. And I want to broaden that term. So by that, don't think I think you have to be an athlete and be doing triathlons or playing on a women's basketball league, but just exercising fairly intensely 5 or so days of the week. That's regular and what we'd qualify as athletic. Then you have a body to maintain. And it's not just a body with muscle and needs on the days you exercise. You have it between, and you don't want to deprive it. So feed it, don't starve it. Muscles without adequate fuel, and specifically protein, will waste. You will want to default to thinking weight loss is good, but it can come back to bite you in the butt. Literally, if you lose muscle, you lose metabolism, and you gain weight, it's going to be all fat. And that is much easier to happen in the future. So whether or not you did that roller coaster ride in your younger adult years, right now, it's much more likely to happen. Weight loss that comes off is almost always a combination of muscle and fat. Weight gain you regain is almost always 100% fat. Another little juicy secret you can use, whether you're fasting or whether you're not fasting, but you want to boost metabolism and you want to get back some lean or get to it if you've never seen it before. Matcha tea before a workout. Almost any time works, but before a workout it can be really powerful. Coffee works too, but I find it creates a more jittery, anxious kind of energy than stable. You can boost your fat burn after intervals by 29% by consuming matcha tea about 60 minutes before a workout so that it's in your bloodstream. And you can drink the tea simply. You can make it a latte with almond milk warm, or you can add matcha powder to a smoothie. However, remember this, if you're fasting, it's only the tea or it's only coffee. You can't have the butter if you're doing bulletproof, or the stevia or the creamer, because those things will spike blood sugar. Yeah, even the stevia kind of tricks your body a little bit. So you want just the clear, just the black. That's it. So before any workout, keep in mind you want to reduce residue, meaning you don't want roughage, right? So have food or drinks that easily empty from the gut. So no fiber or really much fat to speak of. You'll find out what you can tolerate as you experiment a little bit. But in that high intensity workout, you don't want a lot of fat. A little sweet potato with nut butter, tiny bit, and cinnamon. One of my favorite snacks before a higher intensity workout. A small amount of the nut butter, right? Not so much that it weighs you down. So, if you're used to putting nut butter or chia seeds, flax in your smoothies, awesome, but not before the workout. You don't want that fiber. You don't want that fat. So I'm doing a full webinar on this topic because it is so confusing to so many women. Do I eat before? Do I not eat before? What do I eat after? When do I eat after? What if my goal is to gain weight or gain lean muscle mass, and it's not so much that I want to lose weight? In fact, I don't have any to lose. What if I do want to lose? What if my exercise is going to be yoga or running or strength training or high intensity intervals? Then what? What if it's afternoon and it's not morning when I'm exercising? What do I do then? What are your goals? All of it. It all matters. And there's so many variables that I'm going to tackle this in a webinar, and I'm hoping that you'll also load your questions and comments either in iTunes or at the show notes at flipping50.com, and I'll tell you that link in just a second. But it's basically, we're going to be looking at fasting and exercise, so I'll leave that for you. But I want to answer all of your questions, and I've already got so many, and there's so many ways that we can go that we're really going to organize it based on the call for questions, the call for answers from you. There's a lot of advice out there. Fasting definitely has its place and purpose. The question is it for you right now? That's the question. Bring your questions to the webinar. You're invited. Consider this the place to RSVP. And you can be the first to know about the webinar invite and save your spot by joining our community at flipping50.com/any-age. That's flipping50.com/any-age. So I'll link to all of the mentions in the show notes. And just a secret, if you're listening to this on the Tuesday before we close the doors for the 28-day Kickstart 2.0, if you're not yet exercising and you are letting the January train get away from you and you're looking for some support for all of it, how do I help balance my hormones with exercise? How do I start making sure that my joints and my muscles are comfortable and it feels good? And how do I finally make this stick if it's been hard for me to get motivated? The new 28-day Kickstart is just for you. It's truly for beginners or starters or restarters. You've not been exercising regularly. You have stopped and started and stopped before, and you want this to be the last time. So do I. So I'll link to that in the show notes, but don't wait. So once Wednesday night passes, it's too late to get in on this one. So do you have a question? Leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/fasting-after-50. That's fasting after 50, hyphens between. I love to hear from you. And if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes. Again, it's flipping50.com/fasting after 50, where you'll find all the juicy resources I talked about today, the links to the studies if you really like to see the science yourself, and the resources I mentioned on the show. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.